just landed in Leadership and Enlightenment, a podcast where the guests are exceptional humans that have faced their fears to crest into their best selves, growing into a way they can help their communities, creating opportunities, and sharing their secrets and their tips that they learned along the way. Without further ado, here we are, my friends. Have a great time today and enjoy Leadership and Enlightenment. Exactly how I'm saying this. The effort wouldn't have required somebody to thank us to do this. And so it's interesting because we built this whole thing and we're so proud of it, but it's come to mind that it's really not about her living there anymore. It's about the idea that this whole thing had to happen and we were a part of it. My wife and I gained a lot from it. We're prepared if she does want to come out, but ultimately it doesn't have to be anymore. It can be what it is. And you and I start this conversation every time this way, Dean, I swear. We get right into the family. We start digging out the inside of it. I told you, I think there's only 6 Deans I've ever met in my life. You're definitely my favorite brother. You and I come from the same and
I
another
appreciate
mother,
it.
that's for sure. Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is we're both Dinos, but in different ways. I know you spell it with regular Dean with an O, and my name would be DINO, but it's just
Yeah.
funny how we have that.
How life crosses our paths too. Like you and I met in social media, like
Totally.
through LinkedIn, I believe. And our first conversation kicked it off. And then there was a time that we actually ran to Long Beach just a year ago. And I got to spend an amazing evening with you and your wife, just really like digging it out and getting down to that place where we were coming from. And, when you and I first met, you were crossing out of a huge corporate career. I mean, very renowned in your industry. And you essentially use these terms around me like I'm semi-retired, but I'm out there speaking to the public, which is just absolutely the perfect thing I can imagine happening to somebody in life after they've invested that many years. So we're going to take the audience back a little bit and let you have the floor. Why don't you kick it back and tell us how you got started, where you're at, and how you ended up on this podcast with me.
Sure. Well, I had a very interesting beginning to my career. I was born to immigrant parents. I'm first generation Greek. Actually, English is a second language. So, that was some of my early childhood challenges, if you will. Born into a typical blue collar family. And like any old traditional families, some have arranged marriages. My parents thought they would have arranged career for me, so they had predetermined what I was going to be later in life. For those that have old country parents, you kind of know what that's like. And for me, it was they wanted me to be a pediatrician. Lined it up with my pediatrician, had already arranged for a residency for me, and I'm not even a teenager yet, and they had this developed. Well, long story short, I go to college. At the time, I had met my wife in high school. We're high school sweethearts. We've been married for what'll be coming up on 33 years already, and we dated for several years before we got married. So for me, I just wanted to get going in life, and I found a college professor who talked about forensic science, and that really spurred my interest. So I kept the STEM science kind of area of life, pursued that. I ended up working in a crime lab. I became a forensic scientist doing crime scene investigations. I did that for about a quarter century. Through that process, I ended up in leadership roles, ultimately becoming a crime lab director, leading 2 major sheriff's department crime labs. And then from there, even promoted higher into the organization. And at my, I'll say, peak, if you will, of responsibility, I ended up having about 1,500 sworn and civilian personnel, a $965 million budget, and ran everything technology for, the sheriff's department that I worked for. So my joke was if it had an on and off switch or a motor, it belonged to me, and everything in technology in between, from forensics to surveillance systems to automated license plate readers to managing fleet and IT and records. It was all under me. And so that gave me a real great career, a great perspective. I loved what I did in creating impact. It was my way of giving back to community, helping fight crime, solve crimes, those kinds of things. Eventually, I got into government reform and cycled out of that after about 5 or 6 years. I joked that if I can reform government in a major county like I worked in the LA region, I can pretty much solve most, government dilemmas that might come my way.
President-elect, I hear it. Here it comes.
Yeah, no. Please don't wish any elections on me. I'm not going to go down that road. But I have just really, really enjoyed developing systems and, most importantly, developing people. I know we'll get into it more, but I think for me, the biggest thing I got out of my life and career eventually was creating impact for others.
Let me peel that back for a second, because that's where you and I really did bond around that is you had a very magnanimous job, obviously. I mean, the amount of people that you had to keep in place and your balance and will that was able to grow along this community that shines this light through that, the way I always see this. It's something that either kind of follows us along or is already within us. We tend to be these leaders in life without actually having to try. It's not really about that title, it's that ideal. And you started with your parents and honoring, their wishes and the way that you followed the instinct of that family dynamics. And when you got into it, and then you breathed into something that actually created creativity within you and drove you into that. Did you ever feel like there was something else kind of going along with you in this that was a little bigger than you, that moved you through that experience to create that career you were in?
I would say at the beginning, no. I was driven. I had discipline. I had the grit. I had the drive to do it. And I think that was through my upbringing. And as I later learned in a kind of a leadership course I took called Landmark, I learned a lot about myself in terms of how I show up in this world. Just realizing that English was a second language. I mean, I went to kindergarten and I didn't speak any English because I spoke Greek, at home in the family. My parents, being immigrants, my dad who came here, and just an amazing story he has about, living in a donut shop for the first 2 weeks of his life here in the United States before he became a citizen, because he
Oh,
exchanged
wow.
18 hours of work in a donut shop for a place to sleep because he could sleep on the floor and eat donuts. And that's just the kind of drive and grit he had that he got
Yeah.
to impart in me. And what I learned was a lot of what I tried to do was around survival. It was around trying
Hmm.
to achieve. And I started that. I started garnering success. I started making success my hunger, my appetite, my drive. And it paid off at the beginning, but I will tell you later in life, I learned that that was a detriment for me. And we
Yeah.
could dig into that a little bit later, but
Yeah.
that was a big turning point for me, realizing that success wasn't just it.
Yeah, that turning point, I've reflected back in this podcast a few times. The idea of going from that staircase theory of getting to the top and winning to the idea of being in the rings in a tree, knowing you're right in the right place at the right time, and there's time to invest in yourself, and how do you do that, and what do you do at that time really starts to create this outcome. For me lately, it's been learning and realizing like there's nothing in the world I can't learn if there's not enough time to do it. That's what creates the stress. Is if I don't have enough time to do it, then I'm going to get stressed about it. But if I've got enough time, lifetimes to learn something or invest myself into it, and there's a will behind that creates curiosity, it seems to create this momentum in your life. And you wake up the next day ready to go and attack those challenges. And they don't feel like this burdening stress, but they feel like this catalyst of momentum and excitement. When did you start
Absolutely.
to kind of hit that pinnacle in your career coming out of Landmark?
I think for me, it was later on in my career when I realized that, and here's the transparent part for me, right? Is that I grew up trying to fit in, if you will. I
Mm,
mean, kid
yeah,
who didn't speak English, a kid who was from an immigrant family.
yeah,
Some could argue today, if you wanted to put labels, I might have been bullied in school, that kind of thing. Well, I was really focused on creating successes, you see. And so I was doing things, I was overachieving, I was over delivering, and it was all about creating success. And what I realized is that was great for me and my ego, but that didn't really contribute to the world. It didn't change
right,
the world around me. And what I
yeah,
realized is I had to make that transition from collecting success to creating impact, to creating change in other people. And when I finally figured that out later in my leadership career, I mean, I was a driven guy. Many people will tell you I was an A-type personality, and it's not the A-type
hmm,
you're thinking of. It's the other acronym, right, that some people use.
hmm,
So I was one of those Adam Henrys, right, that some people
I
might
got
label.
that.
And I'll
Yeah,
wear that label because I probably earned it early in my career.
yeah,
But what I realized is when I figured out that it's really about helping others, when it's about understanding that we're all here on earth and we're all made for more and we're all here to make each other better. And when you figure that out and you find a way to deliver that, I'm telling you the successes, it's like you can't even stop them from coming in. They're coming in so fast. And that
yeah.
that to me was a game changer.
When you started to really holistically look at the role you're in life rather than the things you had to accomplish to get to that proverbial top of the ladder. That part I really truly understand. And when I started to evolve myself in that, there became like this new institution inside of me that started to grow, that there was this balance or this flow that I could be a part of. And it didn't have anything to do with me really fixing anything. It had to do with me being a part of whatever this was. And that rolled you into where you're at now. And again, I'm going to joke. You said you're semi-retired, but you're out speaking to the public and busier than anybody I know being retired. You get this great joy of giving back now to your audiences. Tell us about how you shifted into that mindset. I mean, the idea of going from, proverbial that corporate lifestyle and that career now back to give back and really kind of launch your own entrepreneurial mindset. There had to be some steps in there that really were for you, some of those signals that this is what I'm supposed to do or this is where I'm supposed to go. Tell the audience what that felt like in there.
Yeah, so I would say the first thing was early in my career, I wasn't shy about doing presentations. When professional meetings would come up and it would be a group, a gathering of like minds, they would have people sometimes going up and presenting about an interesting case or interesting topic. I wasn't shy about doing that. So that's how I originally got started. And then I got started into some leadership training. I had people coming to me saying, "Hey, I really like what you have to say. Do you have a message? Can you teach it?" And so I started learning some teaching methodologies and was doing that. And I've been doing that for about 20 years, public speaking at professional meetings. These are unpaid kinds of invitations, but I did get some great opportunities, even international invitations to come and speak, across the globe. And it was a turning point in my career when I was an executive in the sheriff's department. We had a new sheriff that was elected, and he came in and he made some changes, just like any corporate structure, right? And so he wanted to change let's say his C-suite, and this guy wanted to change his C-suite. There were 19 of us at the very top of this organization. We're 18,000 employees, 18 executives. 16 of the 19 executives were told, "Thank you for your service," right? And I was one of those 16.
Yeah.
I was too young to retire, and that's how I got into government reform, because I was kind of a career switch at that point. What really happened to me was I was just kind of loafing on the comfort couch, really enjoying things, and then, wham, something happens and life changes. And it was at that moment that I realized, I need to figure something out, that if I can't do what I want to do, what would I choose to do? Where would I want to
Right.
be? How do I want
Yeah.
to show up in this world? And what I chose was executive coaching. So I got certified as a high performance coach. I spent 2 years developing systems, and then I started coaching. And that's when things really changed for me. It's going to sound a bit cliche or kind of corny, but my learning how to coach taught me more about myself than I have ever helped probably anybody else.
I love that. I love that. Doing the work. Now this is repeating over and over and over again in interviews that I've had over the last few months, is that anybody that's really invested in themselves, it turns into where this is actually turns around and you're reinvesting into where you're around yourself. There's work to be done. It's not just some magical equation that happens, that you go into this place and you ask yourself this question. Mine was, if I was going to spend 10,000 hours on something, I'm in the gym, what would I focus on? And I realized, like, I'm going to invest in me. I'm going to figure out how all these crazy parts work together and how they're involved in this ultimately holistic way that we live life. And that hits you in the same way.
It
And
did.
then you ask this question, like, what am I supposed to do? And funny enough, we think that we came up with that idea, but it was a little whisper within us that says, you're now ready to expand and to coach and to mirror into others and help spread this light of leadership that you have within you, that yes, you learn, but also naturally you have this ability to inspire around you and bring that out. And then you had to face these fears. Those fears to me are the most important part of a conversation like that. What were you having to face when you went through that transition of, I understand what my daily is. Now I've got to figure out how to make this thing work.
Oh my gosh. You hit it totally on the head, Dino. I mean, the fear aspect is the biggest thing. And I think, what people don't realize and understand is that when they get hit with a fear, when we ourselves get hit with fear, what we really have to understand is that our ego starts to flare up, right? This is something I've studied as a scientist. I have just really have a real passion for physiology, psychology, and performance, what I call the 3 Ps. And the intersection of those three become important because there's parts of your brain that do certain things. There's a way that your brain is wired, and there's a certain way people react. And so when it comes to fear, for example, let's just take the basics, right? We're sitting on the comfort couch, everything is fine, something changes, something happens. The first thing that happens is you go into the fear zone, and it's because your brain fires off. It's something called the amygdala in your brain, and it just fires off with this, "Hey, this is uncomfortable. You need to get back to comfort. I need to protect you." Right. But what we don't realize, and what many of us have trouble accepting, is that when you look at the progression of growth, you have to go from comfort to fear, and then from fear to learning, and then learning to growth.
Mm.
And what what you have to accept and what we all have to realize is that the pathway to learning and growth, necessarily, it's required. There's no option. You have to go through fear. And when you understand that you have to go through fear, you then can look at fear as, well, that's just my doorway. That's just a new opportunity opening.
Perfect, bro.
Instead of me
Yeah.
turning around and saying, oh, no, I'm scared. I need to back up. And now I need to jump back onto that comfort couch again, you see. And
I'm
so
right
we
there
have
with
to
you on that.
understand that belief system. And I think that's what I, looking back as, a young kid, immigrant family and those kinds of things. I think that's what really triggered in me was the idea of, I need to turn this fear into something that doesn't push me back to the comfort couch or push me back into what I perceived as danger.
Well, outside of the fact that we're both from Greek families, which I totally empathize with a lot of what you've said and where we came from. Yeah, I had some weird drive in me too as a child, not to allow fear to be the thing that overcame me. And so like there was going to be a lot of circumstances where something could overcome me, like my football analogy of playing high school. At some point I had to realize I wasn't physically built to play the sport and I was being injured. Even though I was addressing my fears, it doesn't really help if your vessel is going to break down around you and it doesn't really work. So there's got to be these realities and these ideals that open up in front of you, like taking the ceiling off your income or allowing yourself to be your holistic self and facing that guy inside. I use the big D on my side. We all managed in a situation that we came back from, and we can realize like, hey, I was more concerned with the outcome that the people perceived me rather than the outcome of those that are perceiving who I am. And I think that this is really the big shift as we start to talk about this idea of leadership and enlightenment is like that light shines through on its own. We don't go looking for that. There's a signal that's kind of working with us along the way, and it's saying, hey, this fear thing, this is a doorway. On the other side of that is that green grass that's nice and ready for you. But you can't get there unless you're willing to break it down, reassess it, and then establish these priorities to move forward. And I think that's something that's a learned scenario there. I think that the instinct is real, but I think that you have to have the system. I use this step back, reassess, and then move forward thought process in my mind when I get stuck in a fear element. And I really anymore, like we were saying in the beginning of the podcast, I was talking about, helping my mother move up here for the winter because it's going to get cold. And we built her a place for her to live in. And yet she's kind of changing her mind around that. And we had an opportunity, my wife and I, to kind of hold the old candle of youth and say, we've done this. We hope that, that is fulfilled by the idea and the reason. But it turns out at the end, my wife and my granddaughter love it as a playhouse. It'll be there for her later on for whatever reason that was. We had more fun building it than somebody's going to probably have living in it. And then that relationship of that understanding turns into me this idea of not fixing it, but continually putting yourself back into these situations to reassess, realign, reanalyze, allow life to work around us and to become its catalyst and move us up forward. You were kind of, kicking off some of your future dreams and trips coming up with your wife, and a lot of those stand out from what I'm just saying now. Why don't you kind of run into that world where things have turned into, this balance for you now that you've, assessed and moved into this new life of yours?
Yeah, well, going into retirement, but it's really a quasi-retirement. I really almost like maybe shifted careers really in terms of my reality. But I'm getting to do really the blend of everything because I get to go out and I get to create impact for others, which is incredibly rewarding for me. The feedback I get from the audiences who really resonate with, what happens, to have people in the audience come to me emotionally, whether they're in tears or just completely taken by a message, means that, I really, really have gotten to the core of, some people. And that's rewarding to know that you're creating that kind of impact. And at the same time, I'm able to travel with some of the opportunities that have come up. I've gone to some amazing cities. I mean, talk about amazing places that you've gone to in your career. I mean, being able to combine travel, which is what we love. And more importantly, it's not the selfishness of travel. What I love about travel is learning about culture. And we make it a habit of trying not to stay in hotels. We try to stay at, whether it's an Airbnb or
Cool.
staying in a community somewhere. We want to get immersed right in the life and the environment and learn how people live in where they are. and just even understanding different cultures and their viewpoints and how they see life. And having been to other countries that have very little, you realize how happy some people can be, and yet we have all these possessions around us. I mean, we have
Yeah.
more than we can even do with, none of which we can take with us into the next life. And yet
No.
we act as if we have to keep collecting those. And there are people in this world who have nothing, and they're some of the happiest people I've ever seen and met in travel.
Boom. I've heard that, like, the new age of us, those that are coming out and really working hard, that they value experiential travel more than they do possessions. My son's a good
100%.
example of this. And I realized that, like, one of these fun trips that my wife and I went on a year or so back, over the holidays, we went to Europe and we bought a ticket into Amsterdam and a ticket home from Amsterdam. And we had 16 days in the middle. And we didn't, and I did this on purpose because my wife, first off, is a grand adventurer. She'll do whatever, to have fun in that world. But for me, I like to break down these pretenses I have as growing up in America and being an American, because I tend to have all these layers built around me from movies and television. And every time I travel, I'm able to release these layers into some truths. I realize, like, everybody's just working, sleeping, and eating. I'm the only one on vacation or on work in those areas. And yet, if I can find this place inside of me to, like you said, live within the environment, we do the B&B thing too. Even though, hey, my hotel friends out there, I know I would use your hotel if it comes up. I'm bringing my clients to you. This is going to happen. But in personal travel, that relationship of trying to find that B&B when you can't read the street signs and you're tired from the travel, and yet you still have to go through these steps to get there. There's this learning that comes from it, and then, like, a release. And I have only one rule in this type of travel: is I never judge where I'm at the day I arrive. I always judge it the next morning. And so if I'm a little on edge because it's been a long day, I keep my trap shut, and I realize, like, when you wake up tomorrow morning and you awaken in this new energy, it's going to be of this area for you to learn today and enjoy. And I don't like to try and change my environments by how I feel about it. I like to try and let the environment change me. And that wasn't the beginning. That's kind of where I'm at now. But to your point, what a life when you're actually able to layer in this lifestyle of this hope too, where you're out there and you're doing these things and what you're seeing. What is your big wish? Where's your biggest bucket list where you guys want to go?
I don't know that I have necessarily bucket lists. I mean, I in terms of a single location, I mean, there's places I want to go all over this world. We're gonna tackle one of them soon. My wife's big bucket list trip is to go to Australia and New Zealand, and so
There you
actually in
go.
a couple of weeks we're gonna be
Cool.
heading out for 31 days to Australia and New Zealand. So getting immersed there, mixing in a little bit of business while I'm there. So of course, it just makes it even more exciting and more fun at the same time if other opportunities kind of come from that. I have been only to Sri Lanka in terms of Asia, but I've never been to most of Asia, and
Nice.
so getting there is a big deal for me. Certainly hitting the seven continents would be something that I would love to be able to do. My wife and I have really been on a kick in the United States about getting to travel to the national parks. It's a big
Hmm.
bucket list item of ours. We actually have two maps up on the wall. Actually, behind me you can't see, but they're up there on the wall. My son bought us a world map, and so we decided, well, the U.S. looks pretty small on there, so let's get the matching map of the U.S. And we put it up. We put all our pins in, and we're like, wow, there's sure a lot of holes on there. We got to start filling them. So now we're at
That's
the
so
point of,
cool.
like, how do we start putting pins in this map? And part of it is also hitting the national parks, because we love nature. We love being outdoors. I'm a mountain
Yeah,
biker and a hiker, and we just love being outside. So for us, like, that just hits so many things in terms of spirit, soul, and
that's cool.
togetherness, with my wife. So yeah.
Well, dude, you're living the adventure, brother. This is literally, we could keep going on and on and on about this, but I know we're going to have another episode coming up in a couple months, and then I'll be able to catch up with you on your trips that you're going on recently. And I look forward to hearing about the growth and where you're going to go next. Tell the audience where they can, how they can reach you and how you can help their teams grow.
Sure. Well, from the audience perspective, I do, leadership training, keynote speaking, and executive coaching. It's my passion. It's what I've done, my entire life. Getting hold of me is easy. I'm at ceoauthority.com. Just one word, common spelling. So ceoauthority.com. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are the areas that I post. You can also look me up by name, Dean Gialamas. Common Greek spelling is what I tell everyone, so it should be easy to find. I'm generally the only one out there. There's not too many duplicates of Dean Gialamas out there, so easy
Yeah.
guy to get a hold of.
And one of the best. Everybody out there, I'll have
I
the
appreciate
show
it, brother.
notes as well in contact for you. Dean, it's been a pleasure. Can't wait to catch up
Oh,
in the
it's
near
been an
future,
honor.
my
I'm
friend.
I'm so excited for you, Dino, in terms of like where you're going with the podcast and what you do. And I love your energy, and I love, I mean, even just to our beginnings. I mean, it's just a testament to who you are and how you show up in this world. We reached out to each other on LinkedIn. We connected. Everybody has those conversations, the whole thank you, pleasantries. But you took it to the next level. I took it to the next level. We totally connected, and then here we are. We see each other when we can in person. We stay in touch. By conversation with family and all the other things we do, and then even great events like this. So it's a real honor to be here, and I appreciate how you show up in this world for me.
Thanks, brother. I mean, it's a testament to both of us being open-minded and in the idea of how the world works. All right. Well, until the next one, brother, we'll talk to you real soon. Well, there we go. Another amazing example of the universe working in its magnificent way today. Appreciate you showing up and look forward to seeing you again at Leadership and Enlightenment.